Well, Eric, Jeremy, thank you so much. Really appreciate it. Thank everyone for joining in tonight. Hope you weren't just joining in to see a dumpster fire develop or anything like that. But last time I was on here, we did low, slow, and off airport. And so it was more of the meat potatoes of off airport flying. This presentation, I'm going to kind of come at a different angle and think about some different considerations. So less teaching or less fundamentals of off airport and more, just some considerations. Let's get started. So backcountry flying. Backcountry flying and off airport kind of get exchanged back and forth, but really, what the real guys in Alaska will tell you, backcountry is remote, in the bush, in the backcountry, away from everybody, very remote. And off airport is just not on the runway. So many people, many different pilot groups do off airport, specifically helicopter guys, EMS guys. They land on football fields or playgrounds or whatever. That's off airport, but that's not really backcountry. But then in some backcountry scenarios, we do have in Texas, particularly West Texas, like this bottom right picture, there's an airstrip there, but we're out in the middle of nowhere. I mean, we're probably 40 miles from a hardball road. And so we're pretty remote, and that would be considered backcountry. So just to get some definitions straight. And then you can, of course, have off airport in the backcountry. But anyway, so why are we talking about this? This type of flying is really just taken a big boom. The popularity of it all is just really soared. Tail wheels increased, and then this off airport, everyone wants to do off airport. Social media definitely has a play on that, YouTube, all this stuff. In fact, I got a call today from someone wanting to do tail wheel and eventually get into the off airport scene. And he mentioned, he goes, I've been seeing all these YouTube videos and it just looks so cool. And so right now people are into the adventure and the experience and going out and having fun. While you're watching those videos, which there's so many great ones out there, just realize there's a lot of work that's going behind the scenes that you may not see. They're reconning the area, they're surveying, they've probably landed there several times. It's not just go in and check it out and first take and get the video and publish it. So, make sure that you're putting reality into it. The stole drag, that's been a huge success, added on to this tail wheel off airport. And it's all around fun. So considerations to talk about when we're going to these fun places. Main thing is, your pilot qualities that you'd like to have. An honest pilot, someone that is honest with themselves, that they know themselves, they understand your own capabilities, you understand what your personal minimums are. It makes a very safe pilot. When someone's not understanding of what their capabilities are, or dishonest with themselves, saying they can do something when they really shouldn't, that's where problems occur. External pressures, the ability to manage those pressures. Typically, when we go do these off airport and these backcountry flyouts, we're flying with other people, probably in different experience levels, and so we're introduced to a lot of pressures that we have. And like Jeremy mentioned, that PAVE checklist, pilot, aircraft environment, and external pressures. Sometimes we don't put a whole lot of emphasis on that last one of the E, the external pressures, but it's so true to really think about that. And again, be honest, don't be pressured, and just stay within your comfort level, especially when you're operating in the backcountry. When you're, closer into, an airport with services and different opportunities, you can practice more and refine your skills. But once you get away from all the help, basically, you don't want to screw up, because then you may have a problem, but you're also presenting a problem for others. And of course, we need to be proficient. So, just because we landed on the sandbar a year ago, we may not want to go just land on the sandbar without practicing a little bit more beforehand. So stay proficient at all this. This is very perishable. Training. Of course, I'm going to say this. I am an instructor. This is what I teach. And I'm not trying to do a cheesy commercial just for me, but wherever you're at, I highly encourage get the right training and realize it's not going to be in the first hour of training. I have people that come to me and they want to learn tailwheel, but they immediately want to get into off airport. And realistically, it doesn't really work that way. You need to be very proficient in flying the airplane first before we go into that off airport. We in your private pilot training, you did short field landings within 200 feet. I'm wanting a plane length from touchdown. And so when you go after you get your tail wheel, or maybe you're stay in the tricycle, you need to get accurate enough to be landing within about one plane length. So kind of the plan, the big plan is gain proficiency in whatever aircraft you want to use, learn how to be accurate and specifically STOL operations, hitting your spot. And then the last one is to learn the off airport portion. Aircraft. This is Topo Chico, by the way, with a lime. It's just water. So when we think of this backcountry flying, we think of Super Cub, we think of Beaver or a Cessna 180, a Maul, something like that, big tires. We don't have to have that. Ken Whittakin, my mentor and a guy I used to work with, and a guy named Patrick Romano, had a great course they took around the country, and they talked about doing these backcountry operations in Bonanzas and 182s and learning how to fly those airplanes safely, but on their envelope, slow and hitting their spot and being accurate with them. And it was a neat thing. These 182s, the 172s, even Bonanzas, they were all built back when grass strips were very prevalent. So their gear can take a lot more than what we give them credit for. But considerations, on the aircraft when you take into the backcountry or off airport for sure is, you want to have good tires and suspensions. Typically, the bigger the tire, the better. More prop clearance, better energy absorption. Same thing with suspension. My airplane has the old school bungees, and I'm resisting to put the new, shocks on the suspension, Acme Aero struts or anything, but because the bungees rebound and make it a little tougher. But some of these suspensions can really just glue you down on the earth and give you more braking effectiveness since you're not bouncing and using up distance. Prop, you want a climb prop if you can put it on there. The bigger the better, but something that's going to pull your airplane out of your hole when you're operating in some type of a tight, confined environment. So we're not looking so much as to cruise efficiency, it's more of the performance factor on the takeoff and climb out. Weight, we're going to be a little bit more weight sensitive. Fuel levels are an easy way to change our weight, but gear can also chew up a lot of weight when we're operating in these off airport or backcountry environments. Brakes are a must. You're going to definitely use them. So no weak brakes. You want to have a good solid brakes. Any safety STCs, I tell everyone there's really two types of Cubs. There's the factory Cub that's great and it's an awesome airplane, but there's an upgraded Cub that there's so many different STCs that you can put on it. Seatbelt like shoulder harnesses, huge STC upgrade. In fact, going into some of these tight spots off airport, remote areas, I would be very hesitant not to have a shoulder harness. That's a huge one. There's some X bracing above your head to kind of make a cage around you. Different things, prop, gear, suspension, like we've already talked about, all STCs, the fuel, in Cub specifically, You take the header tanks out of the cockpit so you don't have any fuel around you, and just makes a safer aircraft. So I'm sure many other airplanes have other STCs pertinent to those aircraft that you can look into when you're trying to look at some of these aircraft to go off airport in. Reliability. We're pilots. Of course, we're not going to take a dangerous airplane up in the air, but particularly going off airport in the backcountry, you're remote, and when you turn it off, you want to know that it starts back up. You may be out of cell phone coverage. You need that thing to work. So, not taking an airplane that you don't know, and maybe that's a different angle is make sure you know the airplane. You're not just borrowing an airplane for the first time and then taking it to an extreme area and trying it out there. Gear. So many of these things we don't think about when we're going from pave strip to pave strip, but gear can be a game changer. And I want y'all to think of this as, not gear for when you ball up an airplane and you're severely hurt. It's not that. This gear can really add a level of safety, can mitigate risk, back to Jeremy's point, to prevent you from making bad decisions. Helmet being one of them. It's obvious. It protects you. In a Cub, there's metal bars everywhere. And, typically in a crash scenario, you're going to be going at a very slow ground speed. But if you ping your head off the side, that could be game over. A locator, huge a game changer. That GPS little Garmin InReach Mini is what I do, and I keep it on my person. Some people put it on the airplane, and that's better than nothing. But having it on you is the best, because when you leave, that could be the only thing that you have with you is whatever you have on your person. Survival and first aid. This could be a whole presentation. There's so many good references out there that you can look up. But think about where you're going to go and what would be pertinent to be packed in a survival and first aid. Cold weather ops. So I have a rule in my life that I don't get cold. There's no reason for me to get cold. I have access to jackets and heaters and everything, so I should never be cold, and it's just a rule. So when I go ferry an airplane, through a cold environment, I'm taking a lot more gear, because if in the event I have to go an off airport landing, like a precautionary landing or something, I'm not going to get cold. So a small toolkit, going back to, just adding that level of safety, having the tools and, basic screws, nuts and bolts. Maybe your cowling, you're missing a couple of screws in your cowling and the bottom of it is loose, and you're kind of in a situation that you're in the backcountry, and now you got this panel hanging down, and you really, it's going to be an hour away from dark, and you need to take off, but this isn't necessarily a safety factor, but it could develop into something. So just by having a small little screw there to fill it in and put it back in there will solve all that, and it doesn't add any weight. Water. Think about the containers. Hard container, you can use it to boil water, but also in the event of a crash, it's not going to be crushed and you lose all your water. Tie downs, again, even if you're not planning on shutting down or being somewhere, I always have a set of tie downs in the back, because landing off airport, you discover an oil leak that would prevent you from departing. You're going to tie the airplane down, and you may have to leave it. So having a set of tie downs it's a little weight sensitive, but it's not bad. And you just tie the airplane down, you can leave it. Battery jump box, huge. I've used that to help out several other people, and I've had to use it once, especially when you go into remote areas. They're really small. They're probably the mass of 3 iPhones. Weather appropriate attire. So wearing whatever clothing that you'd be comfortable outside in is good. having good footwear if you had to walk out, and then securing all of your gear either on your person. I use a little chest pack and I have everything there. Some people use a vest, pockets, whatever, or anything that you have in the back, having some type of cargo net or a tie down to where in the event that you did have a rollover or something, you're not having all these projectiles in the cockpit. So anyway, just gear considerations. There's probably a lot more gear that you can put in the airplane, and I didn't include it, but there's a lot. Kind of when you're thinking about this, there's the rules of threes. You may have seen that before. 3 minutes without O2, 3 hours without shelter, 3 days without water, and 3 weeks without food. I don't take a whole lot of extra food with me, but of course I take water and shelter. And float plane operations, Jeremy and I, we'd have a little Heats bottle in the event that we flipped over in the water. We'd have a little oxygen, little small mini bottle that we could grab enough time to unbuckle and unbuckle the student. So it's, whatever is pertinent to what you're doing. So where do you go? I get asked this all the time, especially in Texas. Where do you go to do any of these off airport places or these backcountry adventures? The RAF, it's a great organization. It's free. Of course, when you sign up, they're going to hit you up for money. But it's a great organization to be a part of. I'm the Texas liaison, so I would be happy to answer any questions offline that you have about that. But our job is to really preserve, improve, and create airstrips. AOPA does a fantastic job, being the voice of our pavement airports and some airstrips, but the RAF is kind of the voice for those BLM strips or grass strips that are off a general aviation airport. What do they provide? Well, they have this airfield guide that's really great. You can go on there. Again, it's free, and you can see if there's any of these landowners that open up their land for the public access. You can go click on them. It'll tell you what's available: hiking, camping, fires or no fires, maybe access to water, fishing, how long the strip is, what your risk is, the best approach, contact information, tie down information, all that stuff. It's a great resource. A lot of these strips are there and they're published on the sectional, but they're all private. And you would never think to go in and just, fly into a private strip by looking at a sectional, but having access to this airfield guide, it shows the landowners that are willing to share with other RAF members. So it's a fantastic tool. And then in Texas, the biggest thing that we have, for these private landowners, these ranch strips that we land at, is the biggest question is, well, what liability am I assuming by allowing other people to land? I'm no lawyer, and I tell everyone that I'm not an attorney, but Texas does have what's called the Texas Agritourism Act. And what this does is, if you have any land that can be used for agricultural purposes, keyword being can, you don't have to have cows or grow corn or anything. It just can be used. So basically any land that has grass and open native land, then having this sign up or a sign similar or a signature on a release agreement, the landowner is covered, and you're covered over recreational activities, paid or unpaid, invited or invited, invited or uninvited, trespassing basically. So it's a really good thing. It's not just flying; it's camping, hiking, hunting, any of those. And so if you know anyone or if you have any land, you need one of these signs. A simple Google search, you can buy a sign off Amazon, and you post it to your fence, and you're covered. So it's kind of a neat thing that Texas has. Landing in riverbeds, again, another big question I get asked. So in the past, the riverbeds have always been public. A navigable riverbed. There's two definitions to be navigable. There's navigable by fact which means if you can float a boat, or it even says a log down it, then it's navigable. If it's deep enough and there's enough water flow, then it's navigable. If it's not, if it's rocky, if it's shallow, then it could be navigable by statute, meaning it has an average width of 30 feet from the mouth all the way up. And then it's measured from what they call the fast land banks, basically where the banks start. The grass is growing and then it turns into sand or rocks underneath there. It's not measured from water line to water line, but from bank to bank. So this is where, for the last 10, 12 years, we've been landing in the riverbeds. And there was a gray area. And there was a rule that they put out in, I think, 2004 or 8, maybe, I can't remember, that prevented any powered wheeled motor vehicles. Well, my argument, along with many others, was an airplane is not a powered vehicle. It's an aircraft. So as the rule used to be, a helicopter on skids, an airboat, a horse, they could all access these banks, but an aircraft on wheels could not. So it was a gray area, and depending on what game warden you talked to, you got the answer that you wanted or didn't want. So recently, last summer, we were able to get the House Bill 4436 passed through the state legislature, and it's very clear. The purpose was to allow aircraft to land in navigable waterways, and it does that. This is all there is. It's not tacked on to another law. It's its own individual law, and you can look it up, House Bill 4436. How we got that done was, I had a buddy basically that kind of wore out his welcome in an area and got pretty much the state stirred up in this operation. No one had really made any fusses about this until this point. And so now I'm kind of thinking, well, this is terrible. The state was going around putting all these no riverbed landing signs in the FBOs, and so I got a contact, Representative John Cyrier, went and met with him. I didn't really know who I was meeting. Mike Sasser told me, hey, go talk to John and see if he can help you. So I went down there. I knew he was a state rep, and he was delightful. We're great friends to this day. He's really the guy that's been driving all of this, thanks to him. So he's District 17, Texas House of Representatives. He's a former chairman of CRT, which is basically they oversee Texas Parks and Wildlife. So he was the guy that I need to talk to, and not to mention he was the chair of General Aviation Caucus. So he was tied in with TxDOT Aviation and Parks and Wildlife, the two groups that I need to figure out how to make this work. And coincidentally, was talking to the right person. So we started this venture back in the summer of 2020. We got to meet who wrote the former bill that prohibited vehicles in the waterways, and I wanted to know the intent. We both want to know the intent behind that, and it wasn't to prevent aircraft from landing there. It was more of the yahoos, driving at midnight, probably drinking on four-wheel drive vehicles and disrupting landowners. So they put that law into place to prohibit powered wheeled motor vehicles. So that made us feel good that the intent wasn't to prohibit aircraft. Then we went and talked to Parks and Wildlife and had a great meeting with them, and kind of got everything on the table, and they were open. Basically, they were just wanting to follow the law, whatever the law said. John strategized the direction we were going to go. His staff, Jeff Miller particularly, helped write up the bill. They filed it March 12th of 2021. And so we had talked about it a long time before we were able to file it with the legislature. I got the privilege of going to testify at the Capitol in front of the House committee. So what happens is the House committee hears it first. They kind of filter out what they're going to send to the floor. Fortunately, they all voted to send it to the floor. And then John was able to speak on the floor of the Texas House and kind of deliver it. It was passed unanimously twice, and then it got passed over at the Senate, and no one opposed it. Governor signed it June 4th, and it was effective immediately. So currently, House Bill 4436 is all good to go. You can land in the riverbeds in Texas below the natural water line at a navigable waterway. Now, it did take some time, but I feel like for the most part, the process was pretty straightforward and easy. Once we were able to meet and talk with the right people and kind of get guided and directed the correct way, it really wasn't bad. There was no resistance. We didn't have to argue about it at all. That being said, this last point on here, as easy as it was to get it passed, it can be just as easy or easier because there's more landowners than these off-airport pilots to change the rules. So we can't create a nuisance. We have to be good stewards of what we're trying to preserve and protect. The ability to go do this and have fun. So just because you can go land at a sandbar or a rock bed or in any navigable waterway, doesn't mean you need to. If you know the landowner is going to be upset, has asked you to stop, or right by a house, we don't want to push that. You could still have a nuisance claim. Just because you're not breaking the law on where you're landing, if you're being a problem, they can make it difficult for you just being a nuisance laws. So they're still out there. If you're stopped and the landowner comes over, be friendly. Don't just take off and leave. Try to represent aviation in a real positive manner. And then really, if they ask you to leave and never come back, then I probably wouldn't. I'd just continue down the road. There's plenty of sandbars out there. Try to stay remote. Again, we're not trying to buzz anyone's houses or whatever. I got this picture. That's Jeremy flying over a neighborhood, and he's going to land in this little pasture. So I got that. That's a picture I took. Just kidding. Sarcasm. Okay. And the other thing, stay in areas that are used to the public. Part of the Llano, there's kayakers and fishermen and hikers even that use it. And so people are used to seeing activity. The ability that we have as pilots is we can go to more remote places that maybe the landowner is not aware of. And so just because we know the law doesn't mean they're going to know the law. So just be aware of that. And we don't need to be repetitive. Going there every morning, 7:30, and doing laps in the pattern, doing 10 at a time, you're going to get someone's attention and you're going to probably annoy them. Not everyone loves aviation like we do. Deer season, be respectful. People take deer season seriously in Texas. They spend a lot of money. So try to be aware of that. That can be a big conflict. And then risk, to add on what Jeremy said, not to get in the nitty gritty or anything, but basically, if you mostly understand, and I say mostly because we can never fully understand what we're going to get ourselves into because we may have never landed there. And you have mitigated your risk to the most comfortable level you're okay with, and you're good to go. Jeremy and I didn't discuss that, by the way. That's a common thing in pilots. If you can mitigate the risk to a level that you're comfortable with, then that's good. It's when pilots are not aware of the risk that they're taking and they're blindly flying in an area of aviation that they're unfamiliar with, and they really don't know what the problems could exist. That's not a good thing. So keep that in mind when you're thinking about this. So I'll open it up back to Jeremy, and then if we have any questions, I'm happy to field some questions if we have time. I appreciate everyone again for joining. Hope this was beneficial to you guys.
Hey, Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
I want to apologize to everybody up front this evening because my internet is unstable for some reason, but that was somebody else's airplane.
We just keep digging, just pushing, poking the bear.
Okay, whoever is in this room, that was not me, just so you know. And that is what we call a joke. Because I know there are some people in this audience tonight who are taking notes, just so you know. I know who you are, and I've got your IP address, just so you know. All right, Trace, let's see here what we got. Can you please define what protected freshwater area is? I live in South Houston, so I'm concerned about the beach versus the mouth versus the river.
Yeah, good. Very good question. And I can't honestly tell you. I know that navigable waterways are good, but I don't know about beaches along the Gulf. I know that, Lake Buchanan, the beach is there. It's on a river, a navigable river, lower Colorado River, and that's okay. But I'm not sure about the Gulf. Good question. I need to figure that out.
Anybody else got any more questions? I know we kind of had a little, I hope that everybody could hear my little discussion at the very beginning about risk mitigation, because it was really important to understand that you really want to identify ahead of time what the risks are, figure out what we can do to plan ahead and mitigate those risks. I talked about that ahead of time because really when it comes to any kind of off airport or low level flying, sub 500 feet flying, you really got to analyze your conditions because it is risky business. And any kind of flying is obviously risky. And, Trace, I've known Trace a long time. And when we go out flying together, it's serious business. We joke around a lot in person and everything. When him and I get in an airplane together, we do a lot of serious flying, have serious analysis and stuff because it's so detrimental. Eric, you got any questions? Good.
Yeah.
Dan says, what about the Rio Grande? I wouldn't go there. I don't know if it's legal or not, but I'm going to stay off the Rio Grande. I don't want any.
Well, yeah, you run that risk with it being right there on the border, and we don't know what the rules are with that. There's mitigating the legal risk as well, right?
Kind of like you said, don't poke the bear on that one. You know that's going to cause a deal. Just don't do it.
Yeah.
What are the laws and regulations around landing off an airport? You talked about rivers, but what about just there's a lot of open country out west.
Yeah.
Laws around that.
So if it's private land, private or whoever owns it, you have to have the permission of the landowner. So even off the runway at an airport in the grass in the median that's not a designated runway, TxDOT gives guidance that the airport manager can give you permission to do that, to land, to operate on the grass beside the runway. But a ranch owner, as long as they're cool with it, and we have, I operate on about 11 or 12, no, probably 10 or 11 ranches around the area in Burnett that we train out of, and the owners are obviously okay with it. So
let me see if I can boil this down. Basically, just looking down at the ground, you have no idea if you can land
right.
there.
In Texas,
you need to have some kind of map ahead of time or something like the RAF site, I guess.
Yeah, well, in Texas, there's so much. I think it's like 95% of the land is private. It's a high majority. Whereas in like Utah, there's a lot of BLM land, and there is a lot of open space that you can. There's more of a playground up there, and some of the Utah guys and RAF up there have made a lot of airstrips that are designated that are on public land, and you can go try that. We're working, the RAF, we're working with the state right now to try to open some of the state-owned land that's really not being used by the general public. It's really inaccessible, or kind of a large corner of a state park that's not being utilized, and we're trying to open it up to try to put more of these airstrips in Texas.
You might have already said this in your presentation, and I might have been asleep or something, but what can you say for the audience what what BLM land is?
Bureau of Land Management. It's public lands. I think, I don't want to speak out of context or anything, but I think that's where, some ranchers can lease BLM to run cattle on, or they can farm on. I'm not really sure all of the ins and outs of the non-aviation side, but it's basically public land that's there, that the state or the feds, I think it's actually the feds own, that's public, and there's some restrictions, but there's also opportunity for aviation there.
And what
Again, that airfield guide, and like Utah has a Utah pilots group, or New Mexico has a great New Mexico organization, a pilot association, and they have maps out there that show some of these areas that are approved to go to.
and how is Texas's BLM different than other states?
don't
I mean,
know.
you kind of touched on that.
I
But,
don't know if we have BLM. If we do, it's a very small amount.
right.
Right now, we only have one airstrip on state lands,
Okay.
and that's out at Big Bend. Again, we're working on trying to get more, but we have the largest state in the lower 48, and we have only one airstrip that's out there on public land. So
Very good.
What is the RAF website?
yeah, www.raf or theraf.org, theraf.org. And again, it's free to sign up to take advantage of that airfield guide.
So Trace, how does if you got a new tailwheel pilot who says this all sounds awesome, I want to do it. How do you recommend that someone go from basically ramping up safely from flying at an airport to flying?
0 to hero. Everyone's different. Some people pick up the tailwheel skill very quickly, but kind of that hierarchy of training is to learn tailwheel. If you're going to do the tailwheel route, learn tailwheel first, and then get very accurate on your landings and learn the STOL operations of that airplane. And then when you're consistently hitting the same spot or within a plane length, then you go on to the off airport piece of the game. Some people that may take 100 hours, some of them may take 50 hours, and some may take less than that. But it's not going to be get your tailwheel endorsement and then go land off airport all by yourself without assistance. I'll typically try to get an off airport landing in with my tailwheel guys after they've made it through, and we'll go have fun. But I'm really coaching them and showing them how to do it. I'm right there, but to do it by themselves and know about landing in tall grass versus slope or sand, then you need to kind of approach it from the shallow end of the pool and get the training. We have a lot of sand opportunities around Central Texas, and so it's kind of unique, actually. I mean, I've worked with a couple of guys in Alaska, and they have a lot more rocks up there and not as much sand in his area anyway. And so he thought it was pretty neat. But
There's a question of any hopes of getting the Lake Whitney SP strip open again?
yes, I think you should definitely keep that in your hopes. that's something that I think is on our radar, and we're working with those guys, but the state moves really slow. So it's definitely something we're aware of, and we'd love to have it open. I see one about helmets.
Yep.
Yeah, Lauren, I think that Sky Cowboys helmet, what they've done is taking a what's called a Team Wendy helmet, and then they've mounted these Bose headsets on it. To me, that seems like the most economical helmet that fits well and does the job. Doesn't have as much side protection because it has an open. It just has the A20 Bose headsets, but it's lightweight. It's fitted real well. It's nice. It's smaller than the others. I was wearing a Bonehead helmet, and it's pretty big. It's still lightweight and nice, but it's about twice as expensive. It's like $3,700 compared to the Sky Cowboys is $1,700, which isn't cheap. And it's that Bonehead, or the traditional pilot helmet that covers your ears and everything. And to me, it didn't ventilate as well as the Sky Cowboys, and it's very expensive. And so I have the Sky Cowboys.
Got a really good turnout tonight. Lot of folks.
So another question in there about the risk of what are the risks of sand? Just thorns,
Yeah.
branches, etc.
So yeah, sand is typically in the river, and like 2018, there was a huge flood that went down the Llano River, and so there's a lot of trash, that you can run into. I've seen rebar sticking out 18 inches, 6 inches off the sand, just straight out, and it's something I did not see on my recon of the high, medium, and low orbit, and even the flyby. I didn't see that. And so I'll give you this: if you're landing any off airport, after you land, you should just stop the engine and get out and walk the area and see, now that you've already landed, see if there's any obstacles that you need to be aware of on takeoff, and then try to either reroute or move them out of the way. But the main thing for sand, and it's happened to some experienced pilots, is especially loose sand, it has the ability to chalk your tire. After you land, you make a 180-degree turn to turn back to go the approach end to take off, and you're using differential braking, and you turn too tight and you dig in just like you would if you just put your foot down and twisted it, and you dig in and you create chalks on your tire, and you're adding power in the turn, and on a tail wheel, you just flip the airplane and prop strike or put it on its nose. And it's happened to not just newbies, but it's happened to experienced guys. And so you just want to be careful. Also on takeoff, on tail wheel again, you don't want to stick in the gut no matter what on takeoff. You can't just hold that stick back, or you're going to make an anchor on the sand, and you're going to drag the airplane down, and you're going to decrease your takeoff performance and increase your run. So by going neutral on that stick and doing it tail low, you're sacrificing some directional control, but you're not creating that anchor on the sand. On the flip side, you're getting closer to, if you had to abort the takeoff, or you're using brakes inadvertently, that sand is grabbing that tire more so than pavement would, and you're creating drag to be on the top side of, and you don't want to go over that break-even point, or over center point, I should say. So it's just sand is fun. It can be done safely if you use the right techniques. So.
Speaking of using techniques, what is your favorite landing? Tail wheel, or 3-point or wheel landings? And By the way, I hope you're not drinking something suspicious. I'm drinking out of a Princess cup.
Topo Chico, clear bottle. Yeah, so I get asked this all the time. So to me, the 3-point landing is the best landing. It's the safest landing. You have less energy. You're done flying when you're touching down. But there is some fun in the wheel landing. So I'm not this anti-wheel landing type of guy, but I will say the 3-point is better.
When people ask me that question, my answer is yes, because it depends on what you're doing. You know, I like them both. And I really enjoy doing power off wheel landings because that's a real challenge, which, you know, power off wheel landings in Aluscum have absolutely no, you know, real value other than just being, you know, that good, you know.
Yeah.
Because it's a side by side, not a tandem. You know,
back to the off-airport discussion, you know, sometimes there's some really big rocks that you spend the money and get these big, nice Alaskan bush wheels, but you still got that little tail wheel back there, and you don't want to be dragging it through the rocks if you don't have to at a faster speed. So
I can't take my airplane off the bush anyway. It's made for an improved grass, you know, with those little tires. Good stuff. What? We've got a lot of good comments. What do you got, Eric?
I'm going to highlight one thing you said about that I liked, which was pilots being honest with themselves. You know, use the word honest in there, and of course, a little tongue-in-cheek quote here in Clint Eastwood. You know, a man's got to know his limitations, but I like that in that there is an honesty there or self-awareness there of what you're able to do today, what your aircraft's able to do, what the environment is that you're in, and then thinking about contingencies. You know, what are the things that could happen? You know, could happen to you. What have you done to mitigate the risk around that or deal with it? So I did appreciate that you said honest. You know, be honest.
And, you know, I tell my private pilot guys that, I mean, that applies to everybody, every pilot, to just sit down and be honest with yourself. Who are you trying to kid? I mean, everyone that is more experienced than you or me has been in the same shoes that you or me have been in. So it's nothing to be ashamed of, to not be as good as the next guy. It's just, we have to be honest and accepting of our skill level and our capability. Again, that will keep us in the green zone. And the time to venture out of that green zone isn't on the sandbar away from help. It's, you know, somewhere controlled where you do have help. So
yeah, so better pilots than all of us have crashed planes.
Oh, absolutely. For sure.
Who's your toughest critic, Trace? I think it's going to be the same answer that I'm going to give.
Yeah, myself is the toughest critic, and in fact, my wife and I were having a little tiff earlier this morning, and she said, you never admit when you're doing something wrong unless you're talking about flying. You're the quickest one to tell that yourself, you know, you made a mistake or you made a fault. And anyway, I thought that's kind of funny. But
you know, it kind of goes on to that whole good moral character piece of being a pilot, and that limitation is only required of an ATP, but I think it should be really applied to anybody that sits behind the controls of an aircraft that goes in the air and can take another human being with you who's at the mercy of the pilot that controls. And if you don't have the professional integrity to do what's right when no one's watching and the discipline to self-critique yourself, then I think you're in the wrong business, honestly.
right.
That's another reason why I like to do these presentations and these webinars. You know, I always like to ask that question: what is your definition of a professional pilot. And, Trace, what is your definition of a professional pilot?
Well, I guess the quick answer would be someone that's paid to fly, but someone that takes this flying to a level that would be pertinent to someone hiring you, to have standards and limitations that you're aware of, kind of like what we're talking about, and being honest with yourself to hold yourself to those standards, even when no one's with you in the airplane. I think that would be what's a professional pilot should be and should do.
In the CRM environment, and that goes, and this is getting a little bit more into the advanced stuff. And I don't mean to digress, because obviously I operate in a CRM environment, but in that type of scenario, when you're flying with a 2-pilot crew, you got to have a leadership aspect when it comes to flying. And I guess you could apply it when you're a flight instructor and a student as well, because I've flown with students who have 25 hours, and here I have 5,000 hours, and I've signed off many students, and CFI, double I, master CFI, and everything and stuff. And I've had students who had Abigail, for instance, they've got 25 hours and they're sharp as a tack, and they point things out to me, and I don't take offense to it. That leadership aspect, being a leader, is being willing to sit back and listen and pay attention to the people who are giving you information, and being a professional, not letting your ego get in the way of making good choices. That's the idea of being a professional and being a leader. I don't know if you agree with that or not. From your standpoint, when you're teaching your students, I know that whenever you and I spent time together working on my float plane stuff, I felt very, felt you were very confident teaching me. And then of course I actually transitioned over to becoming a float plane pilot and instructor and everything. And, that relationship of backing each other up and providing feedback to one another is a critical element in all of this. And it's something that we can do inside and outside of the cockpit, which is what we're actually bringing to the table tonight. So, I really appreciate it. And I know I kind of digress there, but I'm trying to really hit at the human factors element of what we're really trying to accomplish here. As leaders in aviation, it's setting the example. It's okay to admit that we make mistakes. It's okay to admit that we've had issues. And that goes back to that whole just culture concept that the FAA is supposedly trying to, implement and push, which, according to some documents the Senate has produced, some of the, inspectors don't really respect it. We've seen that in some of, our other offices locally here, and I don't really want to get into that right now. But that just culture approach, that being able, that capability to sit back and talk about how we can get better off of lessons learned, is a critical piece in everything we're trying to accomplish to save pilots from making bad decisions and killing themselves, right? Did I get on my soapbox?
No, you'd never do that. Never, ever.
I never get on my soapbox. What do you got, Eric? I see you looking really sternly.
That's when I fold my arms. I see a question here about more considerations for off-airport or bush flying in terms of weather. What do you think about in terms of weather that you would maybe think about differently when you're going to land off airport versus the normal weather planning that we do for, pavement to pavement operations?
Yeah, good point. There's some spots that I have that, I need 20 knots of wind to get in there and to get out. So if I'm going to land in there, I'm only going to land if I can get that ground speed I'm looking for. And I'm probably not going to overnight there either and get trapped. So that's one consideration. That wind can give you an increased performance boost for what you can do. But on the flip side, when you stay somewhere and you're remote, you don't have access to weather as well. And so I would say ceiling and winds are our biggest threat in the tailwheel world. If you're you're sensitive to crosswinds, probably more so than a tricycle gear airplane. So when you overnight anywhere or you land and spend any amount of time that the weather could change, you risk that part. You don't have access to the data that you have. Some of these spots that I get to fly in the Rockies, there's 80 miles where it's an unknown. You got VFR gumball here and VFR gumball here, but you got 3 valleys you're going to go through, and you could have IMC conditions for sure. And so when you're doing that, it's one, you always have to be willing to go back. You always have to be able to go back. You set it up in fuel and time of day to make it to where you can approach it and not like it and go all the way back to where you started. But to me, that's the hardest deal of landing, specifically overnight, landing somewhere, and then whether you don't have a accurate forecast to show, and you just have to be kind of not on a plan. You don't have to be in a hurry to get anywhere. So that would be my answer to Paul's question.
Insurance considerations regarding landing off airport. That was one of the questions. And, I need to get Ladd Gardner on this program and have him come and talk about this stuff too, because he actually would be a great person to talk. I know that you probably use him as well. But what do you know about that particular topic?
Yeah, so I know the cheaper rates are if you stay on pavement, but I operate everywhere, and so it's full disclosure on my policy because I want to be covered. And so I would imagine that that could be an issue. And I do know that right now rates are going up, like we all know. But in my world, rates are going up mainly because people are wrecking airplanes on the sand. They're not necessarily killing themselves, but they're ground looping or prop striking or whatever, turning it over on its back, and you got to get a helicopter to get it out, or you got to get, it costs a lot more to just get it to a place to fix it. And so the insurance guys are getting tired of paying this out. So it benefits all of us to be trained, to be proficient, to work together, to collectively make this happen so we can all have fun and all benefit from this opportunity. So, but I use Ladd. He's fantastic. He would be a great guy to get on the show for sure.
You got anything else you want to add, Eric? I know that you probably want to wrap things up, Trace.
Whatever you want to do.
You want to close it out for the evening?
Sure.
I mean, do we have any other questions? Let's see.
I didn't see anything else in there.
I don't see anything that we haven't addressed. Paul said about weather considerations. We covered that.
Cool. Yeah, I just really appreciate everyone coming on, and Jeremy, thank you for having me again and going down this road and giving me another chance to not stir the pot too much.
I'll take care of that. Don't you worry.
I just encourage everyone to stay proficient, get the right training. This is so much fun when it's done the right way. Check out that RAF website. It's a free membership, and just to really appreciate everyone's interest in joining tonight.
Awesome. I appreciate it. Eric, do you have any final words for Trace?
No, pleasure talking with you both.
Yeah. Same here. Thank
We
you.
need to get together and go flying and go grab some barbecue sometime and catch up, my man. So I appreciate you coming on to the program tonight again. I'll we'll be in touch, and we'll have you back pretty soon. I'm going to go ahead and close this out.
Cool.
All right. So, ladies and
Everybody.
gentlemen, I want to thank everybody for joining tonight. Thank Trace for his time, his expertise, his experience, and his breadth of knowledge for what he's accomplished. And he's done some really amazing things to help further advance the backcountry aspect of flying here in the great state of Texas. And he's a great friend of mine. And, I'm really glad and appreciative that so many folks came out and supported this presentation this evening. If you got any comments for this evening or questions, please shoot me a note at flyallamericans@gmail.com. You can look me up on YouTube and Facebook, although I don't really post this stuff too much on my Facebook page that often, and then Instagram. And then actually in less than a week, I know that schedule's kind of, this was a makeup session because Trace and I both had family conflicts when this presentation was originally scheduled, but we will get back on a regular schedule this coming March 1st, which is this coming Tuesday night, which is only 5 days from now. I have another great friend of mine, Texas You Can Fly Ambassador AOPA's Pat Brown will be joining us, and he'll be bringing his presentation called Non-Towered Airport Operations. We'll have Pat Brown on Breaking the Chain 5 nights from now, Tuesday night, 7:30, and a link will be going out tomorrow to have as many folks join in as possible. There's a lot of bad news floating around today with things going on in the world. And, we had General Cody on this program about a year ago tonight. And General Cody is one of my favorite military leaders. Obviously, I usually post a comment or a quote from a president or general or some very well-respected leader. And General Cody is definitely one of those that I truly respect. And it's, really neat that he has been on this program to talk about some of his stories, and he made this quote. He said, "Do not let anyone tell you that your mission is futile. That is that a war is unwinnable, because frankly, failure is not an option if we are to remain in the land of the free, and we will." That is a quote from General Dick Cody, the retired 31st Vice Chief of Staff of the United States Army, who is also a guest speaker on this program. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you. Fly safe, keep learning, and never give up on a dream. So long.